Hi, everyone. It's Jess here, and I'm really excited to chat with you today because I have a very special guest on the line with me today. And I want to introduce you all to Kevin Hopper, who is one of my dearest and closest friends. Hi, Kev. Thanks for being with us today.
Hey, happy to be here.
So, Kev, when I think of you and your career, the phrase that comes to mind for me is he gets what he wants. And I think of this because I have seen you over and over again set your sights on a particular role and then you just make it happen. And I think that's so amazing about you. And so, for everyone listening, to give you some background on Kevin, he has been promoted 7 times in the last 7 years, which is actually really cool considering that you have bounced around different in various business segments and also different types of roles. So it's not like he's had a straight upward shot at this career progression. He's really had to navigate making some transitions, just like all of you. So that's what I want to talk about today is how you have been able to achieve this, Kev. So let's start with the question of what strategies have you used to be able to transition from role to role to role?
Um, I think first it's just the mindset of um, adapting to kind of like you said, it's not going to be a straight up shot. You're not going to go from, being an associate buyer to being a buyer, senior buyer, CEO of the company. A lot of people, at least in my career path, jump around. And I think one thing to understand of how you become a really successful leader is accepting that all those different facets and different backgrounds from taking on different roles that are totally different from what you've been doing kind of help build that really well-rounded experience that takes you to the next step as you grow as a leader. So I think that was one mindset that I just had to grasp to fully understand that, hey, it's totally okay if I step out of buying or planning or HR into a field that I have no experience in, because in the long run, I can still navigate back to that path and making sure everything's aligning with where I want to be. I think the other major thing is you always need a core group of individuals who are going to be your advocates. So whether it's people reaching out to you on LinkedIn because they came across your profile and want to interview you for an open role on their team, whether it's past bosses or managers that you've had, keeping relationships going with them, or even past team members. In my field, people come and go all the time. You're never working with the same people. You think, oh, here's my team, we're going to be in it until I'm ready to leave, and that's totally not the case. So just keeping those connections is really the most important thing. And I think those connections are really what have helped me probably more than my experience, just really having those advocates for you to get you where you want to go.
Yeah, that's so cool. So one of the things that you just said that stuck out to me in kind of the first part of your answer was that your experience is always going to be your experience. And I love that you said you were able to kind of break away from the thought of like, I have to do this, then this, then this, then this. I should. And really knowing and trusting that if you take a step away, there's always that possibility to come back. I think that's really cool. So to kind of transition a little bit, what happens for you? I'm curious about like an internal standpoint when you decide to go for a new role. What happens for you internally?
Um, I don't want to say that I become crazy focused on it, but I kind of become crazy focused on it. So um, I think career wise, I don't really have I have some limiting beliefs, but there's nothing that when I see a role that makes me pause and say, wow, I'm really not qualified for this role. And I don't know if it's been my upbringing or my peers or mentors that have always kind of encouraged me to go for whatever, whatever fulfills my heart's desire. But um, it's really focusing on it. And, there's more steps than just updating your resume and applying for the role. It's kind of I don't want to say a dating process, but it's a whole relationship that you're stepping into. There's updating your resume, there's reaching out to the recruiters, there's connecting with the hiring manager to make sure that you're a fit, kind of an informal interview. If you think you're a fit, then it's okay, like let's actually start the process of formal interviewing. And I think the more that you progress within your career, it's less um, tell me about a time that you did X, Y, and Z. I think you'll always have those questions, but as you seek roles that are higher than just, the execution role or even an entry, maybe middle manager role, it's really thought leadership. So the interview becomes less, how are you reacting to this? Or tell me about a time that you did this. And it's more, what are you going to come in and do that's just going to be revolutionary? So it's also doing your homework on the position, dedicating time to put forth some sort of strategy. That way you can walk in and say, they're still going to interview you, they're still going to ask you questions, but then when it's time for you to ask your questions, you can pull out your 5-minute deck that you prepared that says, well, here's what I would do in the next 30, 60, 90 days, or here's what I think. I did a quick SWOT analysis, and here I think are your opportunities. It's something that's saying, hey, I'm actually really invested in this. I want this. It's not because I'm just trying to make a next step for myself. It's really showing that you took the time. Your interviewers are taking their time, and it's really just showing that you've really invested a lot of time yourself.
Yeah, so it sounds like you get really attached to the vision.
Hmm. For sure.
And I've known you for the last 7 years and just like know you to totally be a dreamer and someone who believes that things are possible. And I think that that is one of the steps sometimes that people miss when they're thinking about taking on a new role is really getting attached to the vision. Like, what is it going
Mhm.
to be like? How can I step into that? And what will it look like and feel like and be like? And it sounds like that's something that you really embrace, like from an internal standpoint, is just the vision of what is that new role going to look like.
Yeah, and I would say most times, it's not, even when you're in the role, it's not going to be what you expected it to, right?
Yeah.
But there are still facets of making it into, what you thought it would be, taking ownership of it. And regardless of whether it's totally what you thought it would be or not, it's still your responsibility to kind of fulfill what you promised in that interview,
Yeah,
and turn it into what you said you were going to do.
for sure. So tell me about a time that you experienced rejection when you were trying to make a career move, and how did you handle that?
That is a great question. So, um, like, super long story, but when I was getting ready for college graduation, um, I didn't really have a job lined up, and I was always the type of person that I really 100% believed that I was going to walk across the stage on graduation day, already having had my offer, and be ready to move to the big city, whichever city that was, and start my grand corporate career. And that didn't happen. And really, college was a huge learning experience for me, like it is for everybody else. I thought I was going to keep pre-med. I changed to business, and then coming up on my second senior year, realized that I still really didn't know what I wanted to do within business. At that time, I was actually working in a retail store as an hourly associate. I ended up doing my internship with them, but it was still store based, and I knew that I didn't want to spend um, the rest of my career working in a store, working with customers. Um, I just don't have that personality where I just didn't want to work retail. I didn't want to work holidays and things like that. So was really unsure. And then coming out of my internship, working in a store, I actually realized that I wanted to be a buyer. Um, just understanding what drives customers to shop and how attached they get to stuff when they're buying it. Realized that that's what I wanted to do. So there was a large company that has a training program for recent college graduates, and I had interviewed for it the year before graduation, and I didn't get in. And I think that it was very apparent in my interviews that my heart wasn't in it. I didn't do the process that I talked about earlier. I showed up for the interview, and that was it, and didn't get accepted. Um, then later, I graduated, worked more in the store, was full time for a few months, and realized I wanted to be a buyer and I needed to get into that program. So I reached back out to the recruiter, and just said, "Hey, when are you starting the recruiting process again for this?" It was a rotational program that happened twice a year. And he said, "It's coming up soon. I'll let you know." And probably 3 or 4 weeks passed. I didn't hear from him, so I reached out again, and he just kept saying, "It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. I'll let you know." And I reached out to him every month until he finally said, "You can go apply. It's finally open." Ended up getting an interview, went all the way through the stages of interviewing. Um, and then I got the rejection email, and my interviews were great. I had note cards it was a Skype interview. So I had my note cards lined up so they couldn't see, knew my stories down pat. Like, it was a great interview. And I got the rejection, and I was just like dumbfounded that I was rejected. Um, and I replied to the recruiter and I said, "Hey, thank you for all your help. Over the past, like, probably 6 months. Really appreciate everything you've done for me. Please let me know when this is open again for applicants." And he replied probably within 30 minutes and said, "Give me give me a few hours." That's all he said. "Give me a few hours and I'll call you back." Um, the next morning, he called me with my offer.
Right.
Um, don't know if somebody didn't accept, don't know if it was a mistake, but got my offer, and here I am, same company, 5 years later. So it all worked out just from being really persistent and forming that relationship with the recruiter. I chalk it all up to him. I don't know what he did during those 12 hours, but it worked out in my favor.
Yeah, this is such an incredible story and such an inspiration for people because I think that oftentimes we get stuck in this limiting mindset of, oh, I'm bothering them, I'm bothering them. And there's definitely a fine line between, taking it too far, and just being persistent and being open and following up. And I love that where you didn't give up, even when you got rejected. You're like, every month, I'm going to talk to you every single month. And even when you got rejected again, it was like, hey, let me know when this role comes around again. I think that's amazing to show people what the persistence can do. And I'm sure I'm making stories in my own mind, but I would imagine, from being in recruiting myself, this recruiter was probably like, wow, this Kevin guy is really persistent. He really wants this. And that's valuable to companies. They want to hire people that want to be there. And I think the other thing is that you never know what's happening on the back end with recruiting. Sometimes you could be like the very second runner up and they have to reject you, and then the person that they chose falls through for whatever reason, and then you're back in the game. So I think it's a really great lesson in people just sticking with it, keeping the faith, and not giving up, like you said. Okay, so what do you think makes you unique when it comes to driving your career?
Um, I think it's that I guess I'm still kind of unsure of what the end goal is, but I always know what that next step is going to be.
Mm.
And I think I'm really good at piecing together opportunities for myself that help get me to that next step, whether it's directly relatable or not. Um, Like when I was a buyer a few years ago, I had a declining business. So meaning I bought flash drives and hard drives. Nobody buys flash drives and hard drives. I'm never going to come in to the office and have numbers that are in the red because we're beating sales from last year because it's a declining business. It's legacy. Nobody's buying it anymore. And I knew very early on that if I wanted to succeed and get to the next step, regardless of what that is, I needed to do something that was bigger than my business, bigger than the expectations that were defined in my actual role. So I looked for opportunities that my peers weren't taking or that exposed me to other areas of the business so I could make connections and learn other areas of the business. So um, I would do seasonal events that happen throughout the year. So things like back to school and Black Friday, and I would lead them for our department. So I would help put together the back to school program and work with tons of cross functional teams from whether it was other buyers in stationery, whether it was the logistics, cross functional team, marketing, just opportunities that would expose me to other areas. One, I think it's important to just know what those other areas do within your company because you never know when maybe planning isn't your forte, but marketing is really appealing to you. So just that's one connection that you're forming that might help you down the road. But also, it was an opportunity that could set me apart. So that way, when I was ready to interview to get promotions, whether it was staying and buying or moving to a totally different area, I had something really positive to talk to. That way, the conversation wasn't focused on, oh, well, you've only ever had a business that wasn't meeting your sales plan. Instead, it was, yeah, I had a business that was a declining business, but I grew market share. But let's actually not talk about that. Let's actually talk about this back to school program I led that drove X millions of dollars for the business unit or the company as a whole, or this Black Friday um, project that I work on that covered the whole entertainment team that was super successful. Things like that that were not only important to your specific role, but also that bettered the organization as a whole. And projects like that really got exposure beyond just my VP. People from, like I said, the marketing VPs knew what I was doing, and logistics and supply chain, just across the board, really got me a lot of really valuable visibility that helped me get where I wanted to go later down the road.
That's so cool. And so you mentioned that you found these other opportunities that weren't necessarily part of your job description, maybe through connecting with other parts of the business. And you made a comment earlier in the conversation that connections have really helped you to navigate all of these promotions and all these career changes. So, how do you connect with people? Like, what I'm sure it comes naturally for you, but if you had to tell someone who didn't know how to make those connections, how to go about start doing that, like what would you tell them? What advice would you give them?
I think there's kind of two pieces. So I think for me, it's been probably easier because I've always stayed in the same company. So there's always someone who knows someone in another area that um, can either refer me or tell me about an opportunity. And it's really sharing as you develop mentors. It's really sharing what um, your objective is or what you want your career path to be, that when they do hear of opportunities, you're the first one that comes to mind and they can either refer you or come back to you and tell you about it. I think the other side is the external piece, which I think for most is the more difficult piece because it's totally uncharted territory. But I think for me, it's really always been really utilizing LinkedIn, and it either through when or hiring managers message you, whether you're interested in the role or not, or if you're open to opportunities or not. I think it's really important to have those conversations because it's building your network. So the role might not be a perfect fit. The salary might not work for you, But if you can form that relationship with the recruiter, they're going to remember you later on. So that way, regardless of where you are in your career search, you can come back to them 6 months from now and say, "Hi, I'm finally ready," or "Hey, I'm looking for something like this. Do you have anything that's open?" And they can, whether it's under them or not, they can get you to that right person. And then I think if the recruiter is not reaching out to you, it's finding a connection to the connection. So LinkedIn shows all of your mutual connections. It's really just navigating what that path is to help make the introduction. And then it's just having an informal interview or conversation with that connection, to really get to know them on a personal level. So it doesn't feel like, "Hey, I saw this role. Can you refer me?" Because you want, just like if you were saying within your organization, you want that person to be an advocate for you. So you need it to be a organic relationship rather than transactional, so that they feel like, "Hey, this person's just hitting me up because they want a job at Apple." Um, so it's really, "Hey, I saw you went to school at Wilkes University. So did I," or whatever a small thing that you have in common might be, to form that connection, have somebody introduce you, somebody who can speak to what you've done, your experience, to really help form that connection and go from there.
Yeah. I loved what you said about making the connection regardless of whether the role is perfect for you or not. Because I know in my experience recruiting, I interviewed over 1,000 different candidates. And so obviously a lot of them, ended up not being the right fit for the role. But when I connected with a candidate that I really liked for whatever reason, and it was mostly for like personal reasons, like they were really awesome to talk to on the phone, or we connected over like a school or somewhere we grew up or some little thing like that, something that really hooked me into that person and their personality and their character and made me remember them. I kept, and this was super common across my whole recruiting team, we kept lists of candidates who we wanted to keep in mind for future roles. So even though I didn't have something for this person right now, if I knew that they would be a great culture fit for our company, I was hanging on to that name and saving them for later, because you think about recruiters, they have quotas that they're trying to meet. So it's a benefit to you as the candidate. It's a benefit to the recruiter as well to keep you in their back pocket. So when they need to fill a role, they can pull you out at the right time and reach out to you. So I love what you said about making those connections. That's huge. So that's all that we have time for today. But thank you, Kevin, so much for sharing with us. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks again for having me.
Bye, you guys.
See ya.